Hey everybody, let's talk public speaking skills. If you want to work as a supervisor or a manager or an executive, public speaking skills are pretty much essential. And if your ambition is to be promoted into those roles, it's doubly important. If you're going to manage people, it's very important that you can get up in front of a group and feel comfortable and know what to say and be able to communicate clearly and get buy-in to what you're saying and even inspire people and not have people roll their eyes and look bored and tune out. Okay? If they do, this is a problem and you have to improve your public speaking abilities. Now, I'd like to share something with you in this video. On and off for the past several years, on the side, I lecture in universities in business programs and HR programs talking about many topics, but one of them is public speaking. And I want to share with you the criteria that I used, the points that I demanded of my students that they need to do when they're doing public speaking in my class. Usually this is in the form of doing presentations and things like this, but it's something that I required of them to do. I'm going to share with you all the elements that I demanded of them, and I'm going to share with you how it turned out. Okay, so let's dive in here. Now, what I did several years ago was I found that students, most of my students were in their 20s, and quite frankly, their public speaking skills were very poor. When they got up in front of the class to present, it was not great. And that's okay, because everyone has to start somewhere, and goodness knows I certainly did, but it's something that needs to be improved. And this is for the sake of your career. Now, what I found was I was teaching a course on entrepreneurship, and one of the elements of the course was being able to do a pitch and being able to do a presentation of your pitch. And I found that because the level of public speaking ability was not very good with most of the classes I taught, I saw it as an opportunity to teach public speaking. And so we did a little mini project, if you want to call it that, on presenting something publicly and doing it properly. And this was the criteria. If I can pull it up, here we go. Okay, so this is pulled directly from my notes from a few years ago. Now, the way this worked was that your grade, the way I did this is kind of unconventional, was I assigned everybody 100 points. Okay, so if you got 100 out of 100, that was 100%. Okay, so you got 100 points. And what I would do is I would deduct points if certain elements were not there. Okay, so for example, if we start looking at this here, the first thing in this dark gray was it must take place on a certain day. If you have a presentation to make and it's happening on a certain day, you better be there and it better occur. If it doesn't, minus 100, which means that you get 0. Okay. Length. Now, in this particular case, the length requirements were between 3 minutes and 5 minutes to do their pitch. And what I did is I actually borrowed something from Toastmasters. I don't know if you guys heard of Toastmasters. If you haven't heard of Toastmasters, look it up because it's a great resource for improving your public speaking. Anyway, I borrowed something from there where I had someone in the audience who had 3 lights, a red light, an orange light, and a green light. And because the time requirements for this were starting at 3 minutes, what would happen is the person in the audience would keep time, and at 3 minutes, they would turn on the green light. And then, because you're not supposed to go over 5 minutes, at 4 minutes and 30 seconds, they would turn on a yellow light, which you could see as you were presenting. And then at 5 minutes, they would turn on a red light, which meant that you were over time. Okay? Now, I guess the length here was quite critical because you lost 100 points if it was outside of those limits. So getting the length is pretty damn important. Now, the topic. Okay, this is maybe less specific, but they had to pick a proper topic. And for this exercise, I let them pick any business-related topic that they found interesting. And it would be minus 10-point deduction if they picked an inappropriate topic that, or something that was not clearly business-related. Okay, now, Slides. Let's talk about slides. A lot of people today, when they present, they like to have slides up, usually in the form of PowerPoint slides or any other type of software application. But visual aids in the form of slides. Now, it's great to have visual aids, don't get me wrong, okay? But there's several ways you can screw up the use of slides. And if we read what I had here, if you had inappropriate slides or you had no slides, you should take advantage of it, at least have one. Or you had technical problems loading your slides, operating the equipment, okay? Which meant that if it delayed your start time of your presentation more than 1 minute, that was a problem, okay? If you're going to be using technology, you need to learn how to use technology, and then you're not causing the entire audience to wait while you struggle with your own equipment. Or if you have slides that people can't read, maybe the writing's too small or some other problem, okay? So just basic stuff like that. Any one of those, you get -10. Notes. Some people like to use notes when they speak. Maybe they write out an entire speech and put it on cards, or they simply write topics and speak extemporaneously by looking at the general topics on their cards. But for this purpose, you're not allowed slides, you're not allowed notes, okay? You need to be able to talk without having to rely on something for 3 to 5 minutes. That's not an unreasonable requirement. And there's nothing less interesting than listening to someone talk who's looking down at their cards constantly. Okay, so -10 if you use notes, or if you read your presentation verbatim, word for word, off the overhead slides. Okay, that would be a problem. Focus. If the audience is focused purely on the slides and they're not focused on you as a presenter, that's a problem. You need to be able to hold people's interest. Okay, good public speaking skills means you need to hold people's interest. So that's very important. -10 if you couldn't do that. Now, in this lighter gray area, you got the different parts of a presentation, generally speaking. Introduction, body, and conclusion. So if you don't have an introduction, or if you present in such a way that people don't understand what the topic is, that's a problem. If you make points in the body and people don't understand what your points are, maybe those are not communicated effectively, that's a problem. If you don't have a conclusion at the end, usually the most obvious thing is that, you might talk at an audience and give them some information, but if nobody understands why they should care, that's going to be a problem. So you should have a conclusion where you basically answer the question, so what? How does this relate to me? Why should I care about this? Okay, that has to be very clear. Now, we come to probably the most important element of public speaking, these things in white here at the bottom. Voice. If your voice is too quiet, okay, or if you speak too fast or too slow, or if you're hesitant, okay, or if you do anything else in which someone at the back of the room can't understand what you're saying, that's a problem. You would get -10 for that. Your voice has to be good. Eye contact. Eye contact is very, very important when you're speaking to a room full of people. I've done keynotes, and this is definitely one of the highlights because you're quite small relative to the stage and to the size of the crowd. If you're a student and you're speaking in front of a class and you're only speaking to the front row, or you're talking only to the people on the left and you never once look at anybody on the right side of the class, that's a problem. The people on the right side will probably tune out and you won't hold their interest. So you need to make eye contact with every single person in the audience. At least you're looking at every part of the audience at least once during your presentation or during your speech. If you didn't, you get -10. And something I required of all my students was they couldn't stand in the same spot for their entire speech. They had to walk, they had to move. And what I required is that they go from the extreme left of the stage to the extreme right At one point during their presentation, they had to be everywhere on that stage. And I also required that they come out into the audience at least once during their presentation. There's nothing that makes a presentation come alive quite like a speaker coming at you. You know, it really helps to engage people. So these were all the various criteria that I demanded from my students. You had to do all these things or you would be losing marks. How did it turn out? Well, I taught this class several times, and I'm glad I did, because at the beginning of the course, as I mentioned, a lot of students really didn't have very good public speaking skills. But the vast majority of the students that I put through this, it surprised me how they rose to the occasion. And they did all this stuff. I was quite surprised. I wasn't expecting all of them to do as well as they did, actually, but I was pleasantly surprised. It really challenged a lot of people. It pushed them a little further out of their comfort zone. And I actually got several students that thanked me and commended me and told me how it has helped them in their careers to be able to do this. A couple of them sort of mentioned it at the time, but I got more people that mentioned it years later that contacted me and talked about this. So that's the reason why I'm sharing this with you guys. I hope you found this interesting. If you would like to improve your public speaking skills, this is maybe a starting point. Try practicing these elements, because although you could argue that not every single one of these elements is absolutely essential, if you add these in, these will help your speaking abilities and you will be noted as a good presenter and a good public speaker, and that is good for you and it is good for your career. So I hope you found this interesting. Thank you very much. You guys are awesome for listening this long, and I will see you on the next video. Take care.